Hello everybody, this is the Armchair Game Designer and I'm here today to talk about Multiversus. For those who don't know, Warner Bros. And First Player Games are developing their take on a platform fighter called Multiversus, where you can pit Batman, Tom and Jerry, Steven Universe and even Arya Stark in a 2 vs 2 fighting match. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been able to stop thinking at the insane possibilities of characters that could be added to this game. So, without further delay, this is my top 10 list of characters I'd love to have in Multiversus. Number 10. SubZero, probably one of the only video game characters I'd like to see in Multiversus. The Mortal Kombat ninjas are super iconic and have pretty great moves and lines. I do lean towards SubZero cause his freezing attacks would bring something fresh, no pun intended, in what would prove to be a stage control character. Making the terrain slippery so your opponents lose traction, or freezing their legs in place so they can't run away for a few seconds. Or how about the ice statue trap? That's my favorite move in the Mortal Kombat games. But of course, I can't ignore his deadly hand-to-hand combat techniques. And I also believe he'd be the easiest character to tone down for a family-friendly game, especially in SubZero's case, if he pulls out weapons made of ice. Also, wouldn't it be amazing to have some sort of PG fatality? A lunality, if you will. Number 9. Elmira. Not a villain per se, but Elmira from Tiny Toons is a nuisance to all of the animal characters in the show due to her being overly clingy and smothery. Reason I like her is because it's a character I love to hate, but also because I had this crazy idea that she could be a hilarious tiny grappler. I don't know if Players vs. Games or Warner Bros. Would approve of Superman hitting a little girl, but hey, if you live in Looney Tune land, you're not a stranger to pain. It may sound like she's an odd pick out of the Tiny Toons cast, until you realize that the creators of Tiny Toons deemed her worthy of co-starring in another show, with the next characters. Number 8. Pinkie and the Brain. One is a genius and the other's insane. As pretty much everyone, I knew of these two after the Animaniacs, except I enjoyed this show a lot more. If Brain can figure out a way to try to take over the world every single night, I feel he'd find a way to work as a fighter in Multiversus. They could take the route of Tom and Jerry and have them sized up a bit and work somewhat like Billy and Mandy from Punch Time Explosion, or have Brain hop in his suit from that one chapter. Brain controlling the suit would handle the normal attacks, while Pinkie could handle the special attacks such as telekinesis, or calling Earth to spit some random buried projectile at the enemy. Number 7. Dastardly and Muddly. These two were always my favorite characters made by Hanna-Barbera, both wacky races and when they got their own show as well. Dick Dastardly has so many inventions and gadgets at his disposal to use either to win races, catch that pigeon, or in this case, beat the living tar out of his opponents. It would definitely make for one entertaining moveset, as other than being pure comedy, he'd do what he does best and be a trap-based character. And of course, having Muddly always following him around and laughing every time Dick gets hit would be the cherry on top. I know he appeared in that recent Scooby-Doo movie, but personally, I'd like his old cartoon design the best. Thankfully, if he gets in, he could have both the designs, as those seem to be a non-issue this time. Number 6. Liono. Thunder, 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 Thundercats, hype! I had no idea Thundercats became a Warner Bros. Property somewhere along the line until fairly recently. Which is why if Liono didn't appear in this game, it'd be a gigantic lost opportunity. Now, I haven't watched the show in decades, but I remember Liono being a skilled brawler and swordsman. He can fight with the Sword of Omens in its short and long states. As for specials, it'd be pretty neat if a random Thundercat would jump in on the action for assistance. Maybe in a cyclone fashion like how Captain Ginyu calls for his Ginyu Force teammates in Dragon Ball FighterZ. Why I want Liono most of all is because as a kid, Thundercats never had a video game. At least not the 1985 version of it anyway. So this could be his very first appearance in a video game ever, and his 2011 version could be an alternate costume for those who grew up with that version. Number 5. Freakazoid. One problem when thinking about how Freakazoid would work is that, at least from what I remember, he's the least violent superhero I've ever seen. Sometimes portrayed as a pretty lousy fighter, but on certain occasions he comes out on top. With Freakazoid, you never know. On the rare occasion that he becomes angry, he seems to use superhuman strength to break down doors, walls, and knock out enemies. He usually guilts his enemies into surrender, taunts them into self-knockout, or drives them crazy enough to somehow activate their own traps against them. So I imagine, if Freakazoid were to be playable, a lot of his attacks would be animated in a way that it seems like he's hitting opponents by accident, and possibly a taunt counter of some sort. But whatever moveset he's given, I'm positive it's going to be hysterical. Number 4. Major Glory. Dexter's Lab was hands down my favorite from the Cartoon segment on Cartoon Network. But just like Pinkie and the Brain with Animaniacs, I ended up becoming a bigger fan of the sub-show than the main one. This is the case of Justice Friends. Of course, it helps that I was a huge Marvel fan back then, so Justice Friends immediately became my favorite show. I feel that the best way to represent a playable character from this series would be if the player controlled Major Glory, and the other members of the Justice Friends would appear through his specials. Down Special, for example, would have Kronk crashing in and bear hug the enemy, squeezing so hard the enemy is popped straight up into the air. Or an Up Special where Valhalla rides his guitar, pulls Major Glory diagonally up before slingshotting him in the same direction. Number 3. Legolas. After watching all Lord of the Rings and, more recently, the Hobbit movies, I realized Legolas is just too badass. I'm all for Gandalf, and he's the most iconic character in the franchise, hands down. But I'm a really big fan of archers. And Legolas is, in my opinion, the best fictional character at it. He's got the perfect aim, the footwork, the balance, he dodges like a pro, but he's also a skilled swordsman if it comes down to that. Legolas, joining Multiversus would bring me great joy. Wouldn't mind if most of his moveset was based around bow and arrows. Maybe have an ammo mechanic so he doesn't become too spammy? Number 2. Toonami Tom. Now this is one of the first ideas I had that I absolutely fell in love with. Tom from Toonami. The show host from the Cartoon Network segment that introduced a whole generation to anime and single-handedly made it mainstream. If we can't have an anime character in the game such as Goku, then in my personal opinion, Tom would more than make up for it. My general idea is that all this time he was watching anime, researching heroes from other universes, and now that the multiverse has fallen to the nothing, Tom decides it's time to lend a hand and put all of his research data to the test, incorporating attacks from various Toonami anime shows into his moveset, such as Inuyasha, Rurouni Kenshin, Sailor Moon, Yu Yu Hakusho, Zack Bell, Gundam, and Dragon Ball Z, among others. And my number 1 pick for Multiversus is SWAT Kats. SWAT Kats is one of my top 3 cartoon series of all time. But technically, I'm not sure if it belongs to the Warner Brothers today, but it has had strong ties with the network. Basically, I choose Razor to represent the series in case his stage could be the Turbo Cat itself. T-Bone would be the one flying the plane while everyone fights on it. It works similar to Lila Cruz in Smash. As for the moveset, Razor would work like a combination of Fox, Mii Gunner, and Snake. He's agile, he can wall cling with his claws, he's got grappling hooks and a Glovatrix which stores and shoots a variety of mini missiles. He can also wield a rocket launcher and is good at hand-to-hand combat. At the same time, ideally, I'd like T-Bone to be his incorporated Echo Fighter, even down to being behind Razor on the same character select spot. The difference being that Razor would be speedy on the ground but slower and stronger on the air, while T-Bone is slower and stronger on the ground, but pretty aerodynamic to represent the fact that T-Bone is the pilot. So, nearly identical movesets but different stats to adjust to your playstyle. If you're a fan of air fighting, you choose T-Bone, but if you're more comfortable chasing down grounded opponents, then you'd go Razor. But the idea is that you'd have to commit to your choice and wouldn't be able to switch once the battle starts. So there you have it. This was my own personal top 10 wish list. I tried not including guest characters this time so that I get to talk about more unique Warner Bros. Characters. Anyway, what characters would you like to see? Leave your answer in the comments below. Until next time!